Shalom, this is Rabbi Levin, and I would like to declare that, much to our chagrin, the facts have to be stated. Shmuely Boteach is a homosexualist apostate. For years already, he has been saying these crazy things about anything having to do with homosexuality. But recently, in late October, he went totally beyond the pale when he had an op-ed piece published in the prestigious Wall Street Journal, which totally turns the Torah view of homosexual marriage on its head. Boteach states that he is opposed to homosexual marriage, but he's for civil unions, because the worst thing is for a person to be alone. I mean, that in itself is a ridiculous reason and an asinine reason to embrace civil unions, which is the exact same thing from a halachic Jewish perspective of law, jurisprudence. There's no difference between civil unions, domestic partnership, and homosexual marriage. The source of the prohibition of homosexual marriage is based a priori upon the fact that in the Torah, even homosexual relations is considered a cardinal crime, and on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, in the afternoon, our Torah portion, the reading of the Torah scrolls at one of the holiest moments of Yom Kippur, is about sexual indiscretions, and the last three are listed in the following order: adultery, homosexuality, and then bestiality, which basically is indicative of the fact that on a certain level, homosexuality may even be worse than adultery, and that it's right before bestiality, which is the ultimate sickness or disease. The other source for this is a medrash in the end of the first portion in the book of Genesis, right when it starts to talk about the corruption of mankind. The Medrash states that the deluge, the flood of Noah, did not come until the final indignity when men began writing marriage contracts to men and to beasts, shades of Equus. So the point here is very, very simple. We see clearly that the last step before the destruction of the world, what pushed it over the top, was homosexual marriage. That's referred to not as marriage as chatun or chitun, marriage, but the writing of marriage contracts between man and men. Maybe even between women and women as well, but certainly between man and man. So thus, civil unions or domestic partnership is absolutely akin to homosexual marriage. Now, Boteach is too much of an ignoramus and too dishonest to deal with this fact. The fact that Mr. Boteach has a close relative who is an out homosexual, he should be gracious enough to recuse himself from commenting any further apostasy on this. Instead, he gives Orthodox Judaism a bad name, yet once again, after doing it so many times, because of his cravenness to homosexuality and his desperation for publicity, even when he's standing the Torah on its head. In his article, he refers to the fact that he spoke with Pat Robertson, the Christian preacher, and he told him, Reverend Robertson, why don't you follow my example, Boteach's example? He says, I tell homosexual couples and families, quote unquote, that there are 612 other commandments in the Torah. Come to the synagogue and be part of the Jewish community. This is also apostasy. Reverend Robertson was horrified. He himself reports this in his op-ed piece, Boteach does, and said basically this is in a class by itself, homosexual marriage, homosexual families. He understands, Reverend Robertson, far better the Torah outlook than does Boteach. Boteach also ignores the fact that we call Sodom, sodomy. The act of homosexuality is called sodomy until this very day by all societies. And this is because it states in the Bible that the men and the entire town of Sodom gathered outside Lot's house and demanding that he send out these men who are actually angels so that we may know them in a biblical sense. And the commentary Rashi, based on the Medrash, also states they wanted to homosexually sodomize them. According to the Midrash, until this point, Lot and his family, the angels, were able to petition God to avert the destruction of Sodom. But once the town folks did this dastardly thing of wanting to homosexually rape these visitors to their town, the angels told Lot, who else do you have here, his family? Tell your son-in-laws, your daughters, we've got to leave now because God is destroying this place. That's it. They've sealed their fate. Mr. Boteach conveniently forgets about this as well. Another disgusting thing that Shmuely did was he had on a guest, the governor of Hawaii, Linda Lingle, who was a Jewess, who he had met at some Lubavitch function. And she was very respectful of him, but he was telling her, Miss Lingle, I want you to pass the law voted on in the last day of the legislature and shoved to Mrs. Lingle to try to pressure her to support homosexual domestic partnership, not marriage. Ultimately, Miss Lingle totally wisely disregarded Boteach's skewed advice, his prejudiced advice, because he's trying to curry favor or he has some sort of a guilty conscience about his close relative's homosexuality. And she wrote in her piece, her veto piece, she wrote very clearly, there is no difference between homosexual partnerships or domestic partnerships, or civil unions, and homosexual marriage. And therefore, if she's opposed to homosexual marriage, she's got to be opposed to this thing. Furthermore, we also know that there is no such thing as any locale where the legislature gave the militant homosexual community civil unions or domestic partnership, and they were satisfied with it, as evidenced in New Jersey. They want the whole Angelita. So basically, Mr. Boteach he has not yet, in his op-ed piece, sufficiently turned the Torah on its head and disgraced Orthodox Judaism, which he has long since left in the normative way by doing these things. He has to add on, again, his fallacious insights that homosexuality is something that is only prohibited as a chok, as an irrational law by God. Of course, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, the premier halachic decisor, stated very clearly that everyone understands it's logical that homosexuality is something that is totally beyond normalcy and it's totally immoral and abnormal. And many others have said this, and many others understand this from societies from time immemorial. But not Mr. Boteach. He'll try to twist the Torah and to rationalize homosexuality. By doing this, and by having done this in the Wall Street Journal, where he's gotten such a load of publicity, it really would behoove the OU, the Union of Jewish Congregations of America, that has a multi-million-dollar budget, or Agudath Israel of America, that has a multi-million-dollar budget, and they have staff writers, etc. They, and Lubavitch, that spawned this little monstrosity, Boteach, who goes and holds a Shabbos feast on a TV program. I think her name was Rachel Ray or something. That was so indescribably disgusting, where the other participants in the Shabbos feast, quote unquote, the meal, were making comments comparing the challah bread to a woman's anatomy and all kinds of disgusting things. But that's Shmuely Boteach for you, selling out his religion for a little publicity. The man is totally skewed. But Agudath Israel, Lubavitch in particular, that created this monstrosity and this embarrassment, should really write something and try to set the record straight. I'm only doing this because nobody has stepped up to the plate. I want to appeal to Mrs. Boteach, to Sterne Boteach, to the Boteach children who've learned in schools, who've learned in yeshivas and in day schools and in girls' Orthodox schools. Please, your father is out of control. Your husband is out of control. He's an embarrassment and he's doing serious spiritual harm as well. This will not be looked upon kindly. Rav Aaron Kotler said the worst possible thing is to falsify the Torah in the name of the Torah. This man is like an addict when it comes to homosexuality. He's got to be stopped. Until then, he's a homosexualist apostate who should not appear at any Lubavitch event and shouldn't be honored in any way. Thank you.